Hello and welcome back. This is part 2 of my Before Watchmen graphic novel review. My name is Andrew Ace. You can find me online at UYS999. So, I've already spoken about the first 2 graphic novels that are part of the Before Watchmen series. Now, Watchmen, a graphic novel comic book series put out by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons in the 80s, DC Comics, where they took a bunch of, I want to say, Charleston characters, a defunct publishing company, and reinvented them, or let Alan Moore reinvent them. So you have the Question, who's now kind of being reincorporated into DCU, continuity regular, but that character became Rorschach. You had Owlman, you'll recognize that name again, but that becomes Night Owl. So, with all of that, the Before Watchmen series was a more recent publication where DC Comics, after the Watchmen movie, wanted to capitalize on the renewed interest in the original series, and that was, though, against Alan Moore's wishes, who felt that the original story was a done-in-one, was complete. Now, whatever your opinions on that controversy, they certainly brought some incredible creators to the Before Watchmen number of miniseries. I mean, we'll just call it a series, though it's comprised of, as I've already mentioned, the Ozymandias, the Minutemen, Silk Spectre, the Crimson Courser, and now the 2 that I'm going to talk about, well, the Comedian, Rorschach, also Night Owl, and Dr. Manhattan. So let's go back a step, though. This was probably, in terms of stories, maybe my second favorite. I mentioned that my favorite was the Minutemen Silk Spectre book. This is Brian Azzarello, who is just one of my favorite writers, 100 Bullets, one of the best crime series out there. And he is joined by J.G. Jones for the Comedian series, which was 6 issues, and then the Rorschach, which I actually have to just double check the copyright section. Apologies. But was another one in a 4-issue miniseries. I've been noticing that each graphic novel collects a 6-issue and a 4-issue miniseries, each sort of revolving around one of the principal characters from Watchmen, detailing their past before the events or in between events of the original graphic novel, of the original comic book series. Now, one of the things I love about J.G. Jones, who I remember his work from Wanted, is that he has a very realistic style. It can feel very fast-paced, like you're watching a movie, but he doesn't tend to exaggerate proportions too much. Faces look like you would expect a person's face to see on the street. Maybe a little more handsome, but you get my drift there. And the Comedian series, and I like I said, profound respect for both the creators. The only reason why it wasn't maybe my favorite read of all of this was I kept on coming back to and watching the movie, rereading the original series, the role Comedian plays in JFK's death. I found it one of the fun parts of reading the original Watchmen series was how that they've slightly altered our history to create their own alternate world, but that they've changed these few pivotal moments and then yet left some stand, like JFK's death, and instead played around with what happened behind the scenes. And reading through this, I either get ultimately that, Comedian was part of responsible for JFK's death, or that he wasn't, that he was misled, made sure that he was not there to protect the president, as is discussed in Brian Azzarello's story. So that lack of continuity within what is essentially a one world, one story tale kind of threw me. And that bugged me. I'm not putting it on Brian Azzarello in any means, just that those details when you're reading the original material, watching the movie, reading these books so quickly, they become, more glaring, I guess. Lee Berjemo, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, has done some work with Brian Azzarello on Joker and Luther, which were 2 mini-series that took a look at DC villains. And his style, as I'm trying to show, I mean, it's great. It's very dark, it's very gritty, very stylized. I'm a big fan. Works very well for the urban environment and telling Rorschach's story. So Rorschach's story is just, you know, him on a mission, cleaning up the streets, you know, learning the ropes a little bit, but really just more, you know, almost like a slice in the life of. The comedian storyline by J.G. Jones, on the other hand, details the character's history far more extensively, and you get him going off to Vietnam, and what he does there before that famous scene in both the comics and the movie where he gains his scar. And I think actually, you know, doesn't even go back as far as World War One. So that was maybe the Minutemen. The stories begin to blur a little bit in so much as, you know, you're piecing together events from the character's background when you're jumping from Darwin Cook's Minutemen to Brian Azzarello's Comedian. Works, except for, like I said, some of those, you know, big details that I couldn't quite understand why they weren't, well, better ironed out. So that's one of the two. The other remaining graphic novel is Night Owl and Dr. Manhattan. Now, this should have been my favorite read. The reason why is you have Adam Hughes working on the Dr. Manhattan portion miniseries, and Adam Hughes' art is just out of this world beautiful. From his line work to the coloring, there is never a page that he has drawn that I've disliked. The thing is, though, the Night Owl story didn't quite impress me as much, and so that was by... So the writer for all the stories in this book is J. Michael Straczynski, and then you have Andy Kubert and Joe Kubert illustrating the Night Owl tale that does include a lot of the other characters as well, but involves him, I guess, in a sort of slice-of-life adventure again, detailing his relationship with Rorschach better, but also him dealing with sort of, you know, streets, the city, the urban environment, trying to protect women, and it's good. I'm not... This might be hearsay to say, I'm not always a fan of Joe Kubert's art or his inking style. I like it sometimes maybe when he's detailing war stories. Other times, I find it a little rough and sketchy for my own personal preference. And you really notice his hand over Andy Kubert's art, Andy Kubert being his son, and I'd say a little more of that mainstream superhero style that I would associate with Marvel or DC, where Joe Kubert's style obviously evokes a 70s or 60s style, and it's purely a subjective thing on my own end when I was talking about how much I like Amanda Connor's art because of her very clean, simple line work. This in turn, I find Joe Kubert's inking makes stuff a little rougher, a little grittier, and that doesn't always work for me, I'm afraid. That said, good book. I mean, these are all good reads. I was really surprised, actually, with how impressed I was, having heard all the controversy going into, well, their publication, hitting the stands, hearing what fans had thought of them. Anyway, to bring it all together, though, the final, there's a 2-issue backup piece in this graphic novel by Eduardo Risso. Now, Eduardo Risso, longtime collaborator with Brian Azzarello on 100 Bullets, and his art style is very distinctive. Funnily enough, actually, something when I first was reading 100 Bullets, I wasn't so into, and then I was by about volume 3 or 4 of that series, I was just like, wow, he really, really gripped me at that point. And now, his very unique, distinctive style, you know, he slightly exaggerates some faces, but it's just beautiful. It is absolutely stunning to look at. So, I would 100% recommend reading Before Watchmen. My favorite is definitely Minutemen and Silk Spectre, and then I think from there it's definitely a bit of a toss-up between which one came next. I really would have liked this more with saying if there hadn't been a few continuity issues. And I mean, Adam Hughes' art, Eduardo Risso, I couldn't have cared less about the stories, actually. I could have just turned each page and been happy. Though I should point out the Dr. Manhattan story is a fun read as well. So it's not like, you know, like Straczynski skimped on the writing. Not at all. So, guys, that's Before Watchmen. I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. Like I mentioned before, you can find me online at UYS999. You can also find my own comic books that I produce, acefaber.com, though that is spelt with the UYS in, well, pronounced ace. So, I'll see you all next week for another graphic novel review. Cheers!